Marcus had been living alone in the northern forest for 15 years. His cabin sat isolated on 300 acres of dense woodland, far from civilization, far from people, far from anything that required interaction. He logged timber, hunted game, and existed in blissful solitude. The slave market on the edge of the borderlands was something he visited rarely, maybe once a year to trade pelts and acquire supplies he couldn't produce himself. It was a necessary evil in a world that hadn't yet figured out how to eliminate human trafficking, especially of non-human beings. He noticed the small sack first, bound with cord, placed in a corner of the slave trader's stall. The trader, a greasy man named Vorn, had grinned when he saw Marcus's interest. "Goblin," Vorn had said. "Cheap, real cheap. Bit of work, but they're strong despite the size. Good for labor. We'll probably try to run, though. They're stubborn little things." Marcus had paid barely anything, barely enough to feel he was participating in an exchange rather than theft. He wrapped the burlap sack more carefully, placed it gently in his cart, and drove home in silence, feeling vaguely disgusted with himself. He wasn't a good man, but he was a man with standards, and keeping a slave violated them. Still, if the creature was being sold anyway, at least in his forest it might have a chance to escape. When he reached his cabin, Marcus carefully set down the sack and began to loosen the cord. The creature that emerged was small, barely 3 feet tall, with gray-green skin, large pointed ears, and intelligent amber eyes that immediately locked onto his with fierce assessment. She had dirt under her fingernails and a thin scar across her left cheek. She wore rags. She smelled of fear and defiance. But her eyes held something Vorn's description had completely missed. "You speak?" Marcus asked carefully. The goblin didn't respond. She just stared at him, calculating, waiting. Marcus made a decision. He went to his kitchen, prepared a plate of bread, cheese, and dried meat, and set it on the floor. Then he walked to the far side of the cabin and sat down, giving her space. "Eat," he said. "Then we'll figure this out." The goblin remained motionless for another minute. Then she moved, quick as a snake, grabbed the food, and retreated to the corner, watching him while she ate with desperate efficiency. Not the eating of someone accustomed to plenty, but the eating of someone who knew hunger intimately. When she finished, she still didn't speak. But something in her posture had shifted. The paralyzed fear had transformed into something more complex. Wariness mixed with a terrible, fragile hope. "My name is Marcus," he said slowly. "You don't have to tell me yours if you don't want to. But I need to know, do you understand my language?" The goblin nodded once, sharply. "Good," Marcus continued. "Here's what I'm thinking. There's a cottage about 2 miles from here, abandoned for years but still standing. You can stay there. I'll bring you supplies. Food, blankets, tools, anything you need. You're free to go whenever you want. If you stay, we can work something out. If you leave, I won't stop you." The goblin's eyes widened fractionally, the only expression she'd shown. "Why?" she asked, her voice harsh from disuse, accented but clear. "Because I'm tired of being a person I don't like," Marcus said simply. "And because whatever you are, you deserve better than a sack." Over the following weeks, something unexpected happened. The goblin, who eventually told him her name was Kess, didn't leave. But she didn't become a servant either. Instead, she became something far more valuable, a partner. Kess turned out to be an exceptional tracker and herbalist. She knew plants Marcus had never cataloged, remedies for ailments he'd suffered in silence for years. She understood forest ecology in ways that complemented his knowledge perfectly. She worked alongside him not because she was forced, but because the work mattered to her. She also had a sharp sense of humor that emerged gradually, like a flower blooming. Within 2 months, she was making jokes. By the 3rd month, they were laughing together regularly. One evening, as they sat by the fire preparing dinner, Kess turned to him and said, "You know what's funny? I was terrified when you first opened that sack. I thought you were going to—" She paused, unable to articulate the horror she'd expected. "I know," Marcus said quietly. "But you took a chance on me anyway." "You gave me a choice," Kess corrected. "That's not something I've ever had before. Humans don't usually give goblins choices." Marcus looked at this remarkable creature, clever, strong, resilient, funny, and realized something profound. The slave trader had been completely wrong. This wasn't a slave or a laborer or a burden. She was a human being, not literally human, but possessing the one thing that mattered: agency, dignity, the right to choose her own path. Well, Marcus said, "You've got all the choices you want here, for as long as you want them." Kess smiled, a real smile, not the defensive grimace she'd worn when she first arrived. "Then I choose to stay," she said. "I choose this. I choose you, as a partner, as a friend." In a world that had tried to reduce her to property, a solitary lumberjack had offered her something revolutionary: respect. And that changed everything.